Hi everyone, at Fishwish Coaching I'm often asked to provide an introduction to lure fishing for beginners. Some of them are new to it, but either way they are guaranteed to have one big problem, and that's that they've gone online to research it or ask some simple questions on social media like what's the best all-rounder lure setup, what's the best lure setup for beginners, and they'll get given a load of duff information or conflicting information. So in this video I'm going to explain the different types of lure rods that are out there and how to choose one. I'm going to explain how to match that with a suitable reel and suitable line, and then I'm going to explain all the different types of lures and how they can be applied, where to apply them and when. So it'll be a series of videos, and it's going to be focused predominantly on the UK, but the fundamentals are going to be universally applicable anywhere. Sadly, the first question I'm asked is what do I need to buy, not what do I need to do? And the answer to that is you might not need to buy anything. If you've come into fishing from a different discipline, you might have a rod that's fine for lure fishing. My first ever lure caught fish was a chub using my match rod, my float rod, using a Mepps spinner on 5-pound line. My second fish was a pike using my carp rod, 12-foot carp rod, 15-pound line. And from there I went on to catch mackerel and bass, again just using standard fishing kit, not dedicated lure kit. So that's the first thing to bear in mind. If you're not going that often, why buy a dedicated piece of lure fishing kit? Right, so the answer to that question is that with a dedicated lure rod, you'll be able to have a wider range of lures that you can cast out. So when I caught my chub on my float rod, I was limited to very tiny lures like this Mepps spinner here. When I caught my pike on my carp rod, I was limited to using very heavy lures like this Toby spoon. With a lure rod, you'll have a range of weights that you can cast within. This is my bass rod normally. It's got a casting weight range of 10 to 50 grams. That's quite a wide casting range. Often you'll buy a rod and it will say something like 10 to 20 grams. But that's because this particular rod has what's called an all-through action or a parabolic action. That means the rod completely flexes on the casting. It's a flexible rod, so it's a good all-rounder choice. So if you go online and Google what's the best all-rounder lure setup for a beginner, the answer you're going to get back is that the casting range should be for around 20 to 40 grams. But in the UK, we've got a growing interest in things like ultralight lure fishing, LRF, which is light rock fishing, and perch fishing. There's also a bigger interest in lure fishing for chub and trout. And in all those instances, a 20 to 40 gram casting weight range would be too heavy. So there's some really important qualifying questions we need to be asking ourselves before we go out and splash the cash. Those questions are, where are you going to be fishing and what are you going to be catching? This is why you need to support your local tackle shops. They're an absolute hive of information, and the guy behind the counter is really going to help get an informed bit of advice across to you about where you should start off, or get a coach. So if you follow that basic principle of working out what you're going to catch, where you're going to catch it, what lures you need to cast, that'll inform you into buying the right rod. In my instance, when I'm introducing beginners to lure fishing, often it's down on the canal. It's a nice flat tow path. There's plenty of perch and plenty of small pike in that canal for them to target. And for that, I use this setup. This is a 4 to 12 gram casting range. I don't know if you can see that on there. And it's a 6'7" rod. Now, reality is that much of our waterways are depleted environmentally. There's a lot less big fish around than there used to be, and there's more people trying to catch them. So targeting smaller fish like mini species in harbours, or just targeting perch that are normally more in abundance, has really taken off in the UK. So LRF is what we'd call it if you're out in the harbours, or ultralight or finesse fishing if you're going for the perch. So this is an LRF rod. You'll see on here that it's got even lighter casting range, up to 7 grams on here. Okay, the braid on here is matching that, so that's only £10 braid on there. The one thing I would say to beginners is to take caution if you're going down that route, because the line control of a very light braid like that is actually quite difficult and requires a skill in controlling that rod tip and that line flying off the reel. That's 3 different rods with 3 different casting ranges. The thing I haven't mentioned is the length. All 3 of those were 6'7" long. If you're wanting to hoof out lures off the beach for bass long distance, you'll want a longer rod. Again, you might be targeting perch or pike on a big open reservoir where your distance is a really important factor. Go for a longer rod. But going back to that scenario where you're on a canal, short, tight chucks, you'll want to work that lure right up to your feet. Because what fish do is they follow that lure all the way in. The reason why they do that, I think, is because they know that that fish, that prey fish, is going to have to turn around at some point when it hits that bank. And that is the moment that it can nab it. Short rods, tight spaces. Long rods, casting distance. A shorter rod allows you to make very quick switches from side to side when you're playing a fish. A longer rod, that's more awkward and difficult, especially close up. So a short rod is great for sport fish that are zipping around in different directions. If you're quite tall, you might go for a 7.5 foot rod. If you're quite short, then you might want to go for a 6.5 foot rod. If you're going to be fishing at a place near to you that's got loads of vegetation going out 2 or 3 metres in the summer and you're wanting to target perch and chub, you're going to want a rod that's got the reach to get past that vegetation as you're bringing that lure in. The other thing you'll notice about the rods that I've shown so far, ignore the reel, is that the rod butt is very short. On my carp rod and my match rod, this rod butt would have continued all the way down here past my elbow. Now the reason why the lure rod has the short butt is so that you can pass it from left to right across your body as you're working the lure or playing a fish. Another quality that you want to look for in your lure rod is the action of the tip. This is the LRF rod that I showed you a moment ago. It's designed for fishing ultralight lures, sometimes statics, they're not even moving. And for that reason, the tip's very light so that you can actually see when the fish bites. It's also why it's bright white. Conversely, you'll have something like the Corum snapper rod that's designed for jerking very big, heavy lures abruptly and quickly. Most lure rods would bend round when you try and jerk that lure around. Perks and jerks, they need abrupt forces put through that rod, and that rod needs to be stiff. If it's soft, it's just going to absorb all that movement that you're trying to impart into the lure. Right, so you're paying attention, right? Then you would have noticed that reel was a multiplier, not a fixed spool. Spinning reel, multiplier, fixed spool. If you've got your heart set on using a bait caster reel, you'll probably want to buy a rod that's got a pistol grip handle. You'll also notice that a rod that's designed for fishing with a bait caster will have more rod rings along its length. With a fixed spool reel, you'll find the rings are bigger, wider, and that there's fewer of them, and that's because of the spiralling out of the line. They need to accommodate for that. Finally, if you think you're going to be out sea fishing more than anything else, make sure you go for a lure rod that's resistant to salt. Okay, to summarise then, if you're going to go out there and specifically target pike, you probably want a casting range up to about 50 grams. If you're going to go for pike and perch, then a good all-round rod would be something that casts between 15 and 30 grams. If you're going out onto a venue where you're predominantly targeting perch but want to deal with pike, you want to be casting between 7 and 15 grams. If you're just going for those perch, not using a wire trace, using tiny lures, then you want something that casts about up to 10 grams. The best budget price rod is going to be about £50. At that mark, you're guaranteed to get something that's got a standard of quality that you can rely on. I'd probably spend between £50 and £100 on each of my lure rods. You can spend up to 500 quid on a lure rod if you want, but for me personally, I'd much rather have a range of lure rods with different casting weights, different lengths, different tip actions, than just 3 or 4 very expensive ones that I can show off to my mates with. One of the key differences you'll find in the more expensive rods is that they've got more strength in the butt section, and you'll be able to play bigger fish with more control because of that extra quality carbon that your rod's made from. So I hope that helps, and if you've got any questions or any comments, please do leave them behind, because it doesn't matter how much fishing you do, you're always learning, and that doesn't exclude me. Next video, I'm going to look at the reels and the types of reels to match with your rods. Thanks for watching. Catch you next time.